Morning. Excuse me, good afternoon. It's good morning your time, Chris. Good afternoon our time. So I
Well,
say both.
thank you.
But thank you for being with us. I'm here today with Chris Rising from Rising Realty Partners in beautiful LA. I know that's a virtual background because I don't think you're in the sky. I think your house is down on the ground.
Yeah, I'm not sitting up at Griffith Park Observatory right now. So
Gotcha.
that is a screen.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Chris. So I wanted to very much, we have a mutual friend in Mark Gittleman, and I very much wanted to talk with you today and find out from your standpoint, because you're very different than the folks we had on our View from the Top panel the other day. You've got a different flavor on things and going in March to a little bit of a different drummer. So, from where you're sitting, what is the future look like? What are you thinking about right now in terms of getting everybody back in the buildings? And how are you viewing your situation right at the moment?
Well, a few things I lead with. I lead with, our rent collection in April across our 5 million square feet was actually pretty strong. It shows that our assets are well leased to credit tenants. We have a 60,000 square foot tenant and we work in Denver, and at the last possible minute, they did pay their rent. So we were very pleased with that. So our collections are good. I think it's very clear that the people who are getting really destroyed are the retailers. So we have tenants who do, they have small salad shops or sandwich shops. They have all really gotten hammered. But our hope is that they receive PPP loans, because that's what that system is designed for, so they can pay their employees and their rent and other utilities. So I think across our portfolio, April was better than we had feared. We will see what May brings. I think there is a drumbeat, even here in the state of California, of people preparing to come back to work. I'm not saying people are coming back, but more and more our discussions, I think the first 4 weeks of this has all been about panic and COVID and am I going to get it? And now people are starting to say, okay, this will end at some point. And so our team is being very proactive. And in fact, when tenants come back to our buildings, whenever that day is, we want to make sure that they feel safe. And health and wellness has always been a part of our strategies for all of our buildings. We've always monitored the light, the air, the water. We are going to make those measurements more obvious to our tenants so that they really understand that they're in a healthy and clean building. All of our buildings have air filters so that the air is clean and it is monitored. We're going to do our best to get people to not have to touch services. Some of our projects are absolutely touchless. A fob reads that they're there. The elevator comes, goes to their space. Our security teams are going to be working to make sure elevators don't get packed. We will have things like masks. We'll have things like hand sanitizer. I think this is an opportunity for a company like ourselves to really shine when it comes to the community we've built. And then I think one of the biggest keys is the technology we bring to our buildings. And I think the hidden ugly secret to what's been going on with work from home is the security risk. I think when people do come back, they're going to recognize that VPNs are pretty good, and especially if you have a server at the office. Encrypted cloud is also very good, but you really don't want someone's computer to a home network, tied to a home Wi-Fi network, that somehow could allow a bad actor to come in and move money and such. And we've heard a lot of cases that are just not getting the publicity. So I think Gensler, as a group that we work with very closely, they have a theory that the office will move towards being much more of a hub and a brand for a company, and not a place where people get necessarily work done. You go to the office to have creative collisions, to really work together. I think office space is probably going to stay at this size and get bigger. The densification that WeWork brought, I think, is over. So look, this is an awful, awful time, and I know that my family and I are ready for it to end, but it will end, it will pass, and people are going to come back. I think we'll see social changes. I think shaking hands will go away, but I also think that ultimately we're social human beings and we're going to want to get back into a normal life. And the further we get past this immediate period, I think life will look a little bit more normal. But I think what we'll see is a transition outside of our presidential politics, where we have a 73-year-old president and a 77 or 8-year-old running against him. I think this is the end of the baby boomer leadership across corporate America. And you'll see a wave of Gen X and millennials come in who will view work differently. That the days of you were only working hard if you showed up at 7:30 at the office and left at 7:30 at night are over. And workforces will be disintermediated from one huge place into, you'll work from different areas, and you'll come together at some HQ at the times when the company needs to be focused on culture and teamwork and those kind of things.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit more about your portfolio. I'm not as up on it as I'd like to be. So tell us what you've got in that 5 million square feet. What's the mix?
It's all office with some mixed use component. We're between Denver and Southern California. We're the second largest landlord in downtown Los Angeles. We have a mix of what I would say historic creative office, as well as traditional Class A. So we're very much in the center of office and the discussion about what office is going to be. I think it's going to be different. It'll be a different experience, but it will still maintain the concept of company is a collection of people all striving towards a purpose. And it's really hard to do that if you don't have a place where people can be together. We've already gone through our office and we had an open office plan with lots of huddle rooms. We're now getting plastic guards. We're moving people further apart. I think the 6-foot office concept that I've heard one of the service firms out there promoting, I just don't think that works. But I think you provide people with enough safety, the sense of safety, and that's what we're working on. And we're working with our tenants. We've partnered with Gensler to try to, if our tenants need help within their space, to look at it. We're continuing to partner with some of the firms like around health and wellness. I think that's the biggest thing. People are going to have to feel that they're taken care of and they're safe when they come back.
Gotcha. So, you use the terminology creative collisions. And I think that's funny because I look at you as a guy who's sort of very, down to earth and, looking at the basics. But, that's an interesting concept. In other words, that's a sort of, to me, that's kind of a WeWork word. Are you doing sort of the WeWork on your own brand thing with your own space rather than letting the WeWorks and the Convenes and the Notels and those kinds of guys come in and take that profit margin? Are you working on one of your own so that you've got that concept?
Well, first of all, I actually stole the creative collisions from Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs talked about it with Pixar, where he designed it, where the bathroom was a place for essentially located for creative collisions. I know the WeWork team well. I wish them luck. I hope that they can restructure themselves in a way that makes sense. Having been an investor in other co-working, I do believe there is a place for co-working. The model, I just think, will be very different. It'll be much more like Convenes, where it's some sort of partnership with the landlord. You asked if we are doing it. We pride ourselves in our ability to do effective property management, and we have no problem taking over co-working. I think the importance of co-working or an office building is going to lay in the technology that it can provide for its client, for its users. Because I do think that these kind of meetings that we're doing right now are going to become kind of the first stage of business. I think the trips that I've taken all across the country and into Canada and to Europe to try to raise money, that were really just first time meeting people, and you get 30 minutes with them in their conference room. And I think those meetings are going to get replaced. And so people are just not going to rely on doing that on their home Wi-Fi. And they're going to be a little more concerned about what they look like. They might shave, unlike me, but they're going to want a more professional experience in that. And that's where I see co-working and people who are providing co-working opportunities I think you'll see things like podcast rooms, and you'll see things like video conferencing that people can rely on, so that someone doesn't have to fly to Europe to have their first meeting and get told no on something. That happens on the third or fourth meeting when you've developed a video relationship. So I do think co-working is here to stay. It will, and maybe even in the suburbs, probably more. I just think the model of a co-working company leasing space for 10 years, trying to get it as dense as possible, and then release that at the arbitrage. I don't think that model works. It hasn't worked for Regis over several cycles. But I think partnering with landlords is where that's headed.
Gotcha. So I referred to you before. We met first in LA a couple of years ago, but I referred to you before as the largest developer on the West Coast. Do you have a lot of projects in development at this point in time, or up to, when the COVID thing started?
And we are not the largest developer. I think that's a legacy of my father and his reputation that he built over at Catellus. We are not anywhere close to that. Our friends at Hines and Lincoln Property Company, they are much larger in their development pipeline for that. I think what we have been leaders in, and people have looked to us as an adaptive reuse. So taking existing projects, adaptively reusing them for the 21st century, especially in the historic sector. To me, we see an opportunity. Look, we have a whole repricing of the market going on right now. And the problem is nobody knows where it is. So the knife is falling. I think people are just arbitrarily saying things are 20 to 30% less just because of this strategy, and that's just what they are. But we haven't seen transactions that would define where the market is. I think the opportunity is that there's a lot of buildings that were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s that haven't kept up on CapEx, haven't met the standards that people are going to demand about air quality, building efficiency, and technology. And there's going to be a total repricing, and there's going to be opportunities to go in from people who know how to remove asbestos, lead paint, redo HVAC systems. I mean, I think the days of a tenant saying, I'll move into a building, but when I want after hours air, I have to pay for the whole building and the whole floor are way over. And they're also going to want to have something that they can look at and say, okay, the air quality is good. And so like every recession, there's a weeding out, and I think there'll be winners and losers. We have several projects that are doing just fine through this. We have others that, were early on and we needed to get a leasing momentum. And I think the leasing momentum is going to be slow. So we're going to have to work with our team and with our lender and everybody to try to see how that new world. So if that's us, and we historically do not use much leverage, I think there's a lot of people out there who's probably using a lot of leverage are going to have to sell at discounted rates. And the other thing is, and I think it's really important, nobody knows what a lease rate is right now. Now we are in lease negotiations, and tenants need the space. We're not seeing any new changes or drops in rent, but give it May and June and July, then we'll start to see where lease rates are, and then we'll know where the values are on buildings.
Got it. So one of the things you mentioned is, the tenants are going to want, to be safe, and they're going to want to know what the technology is in that building. So our community is very much based on connectivity, and we do delve into the prop tech world, but primarily we're there to help the educational outreach to teach commercial real estate folks what they need to know about the new world order in terms of connectivity, and that is Wi-Fi 6, and that is CBRS, and that is DAS systems, and all those kinds of things. And so where are you in terms of, you're very high on the technology piece, I know, but where are you sort of in the connectivity piece, and how connectivity ties all of that together?
I appreciate the question. I think that Mark Gittleman and I started a telecom company called 5x5 Telecom in 2014. We've now spun that off as a third-party business that he runs. And the reason we started is we saw back in 2014 that the big consumer-focused telecoms were not really effective in meeting the needs of small business tenants on connectivity. And so we also saw this mobility coming to the workforce that we hadn't seen before. And so thanks to Mark and his team, we have some IP around encrypted Wi-Fi. So, and we've copyrighted a term called connected square footage, and that we break down walls, meaning that you might lease 2,000 square feet in our project, but you can work on an encrypted system that banks can use and others can use. down at the coffee shop or at the over in the park. I think connectivity is going to be a defining factor in our society over the next 10 years. And I say that because we have a very unfair thing going on right now where kids are being asked to, work from home on their schoolwork with the assumption that everybody has connectivity in their homes. And I just think, I think it's a hard problem we're going to have to solve. Elon Musk is trying to solve it with his Starlit network. I think that's what he calls it. But I think connectivity is going to be a definitive thing and should be part of any U.S. infrastructure plan that we have to get broadband to rural areas. We have to get broadband into poor areas. We have to have it be accessible by all. And I think the winners and losers on office buildings are going to be those that can really deliver that experience. And we have something new coming in. It's 5G. And there's also a new Wi-Fi metric coming out that is even faster. But all of it really depends. There's got to be connectivity to an antenna at some point. So it's nice that AT&T talks about 5G, but look, it's not going to work in rural, in most residential neighborhoods because they're not going to make the investment in the fiber and the antennas in those. They're going to do it in denser areas. And then the other thing with 5G is it doesn't go through walls very well. So only buildings that have strong connectivity and fiber through the building and vertical and horizontal runs where you could put those antennas will 5G be effective. But here's, I think, what's really important, and I think I equate it a little bit to the 30s is, 1930s, people are desperate right now and people are not sure where they're going to go. And this is when ingenuity happens. This is when real breakthroughs happen. And I think the breakthroughs around both software and hardware over the next 4 or 5 years and how it relates to connectivity, that's where the growth is going to be. I mean, I just see it. And so for us, we're all in. We have all our chips on the table on connectivity, and we're trying to grow this business. We've grown it now both out of California and Northern California into Texas and other places. And I think it'll be a determining factor of whether you are a Class A. I think the definition of Class A is going to evolve a little bit more, and it's going to have two factors. What's your connectivity, and you have to have a certain wired score to be a Class A, and what's your health and wellness, and you have to have a certain level of health and wellness. And I would put a third, which is carbon footprint and how you are reducing your carbon footprint. And you have to be at the top of all of those to truly be a Class A building for an investor.
Yeah, geez, you sound like me. In other words, connectivity, in terms of what makes a Class A office building a Class A building at this point in time. It's not the marble lobby anymore. It's do you have good connectivity? So is it harder for you to do business in California as a developer and a real estate owner and a landlord than it is for you to do business elsewhere if you were in, solely in Denver and Texas or other places? What's the climate like for landlords in California, given the bent of people in that state at this point in time?
So it's tough. And I'm a lifelong Los Angelino. My father moved to California in 1954. And I've lived here, but for the 4 years I lived in North Carolina going to Duke University, I've lived here all my life. I love where we live. I love the weather. With what's happened over the last 6 weeks, you can see why California was the paradise that everybody came to. The air is clean. We had a group of peacocks in our backyard. I've lived here for 15 years, never seen that before. The wildlife is coming back. However, because this is a place that lots of people want to be, the strain on our state is quite big, and the NIMBYism is really unbelievable. Our homeless problem is really rooted in our affordability problem, our housing, because it is so difficult to do things here. I don't know if that will change. I think I look at a place like Texas, as Texas continues to see inbound U.S. immigration into their major cities. I mean, they're looking a lot like California cities in terms of their economic policies and things like that, not at the statewide level. I mean, Texas reminds me of the California of the 1980s when, you'd move your back office down to Orange County or out to Simi Valley or to Sacramento. and you keep yourself. I mean, that's kind of what's happening in Texas. So I think it's just a fact that people want to live here. It's got a great quality of life in terms of the weather. And we have to fix ourselves, though. I've been a lifelong Democrat, but a moderate conservative Democrat. And I am really disturbed that we don't have a strong Republican Party, because I think we need the balance. And I think that's what works. And I think it's just there's so many other things that we do here. The governor's been ridiculed for being called he calls us a nation state, but we are the 5th largest economy in the world. And you look at what's driving the economy right now, it's technology and techtainment. That's all in California. It's pretty hard to move any of that stuff and just pick it up and say we're going to Tennessee or Alabama, or because taxes are cheaper, because you need the smart cities. And our thesis and how we invest, we look for these smart people cities. And when you look at California, we have 5 cities that reflect that. They're large millennial population, well-educated, and you've got places for people who get those jobs who can afford to live. And so, California has 5 of those with all the problems we have. But we have to fix CEQA. That is the number one. For those who don't know what CEQA is, the California Environmental Quality Act, because it's become a weapon for every NIMBY to stop development. We have to get much smarter about some of the lawsuits that get brought up, and it takes 4 years to get something built rather than 6 months, like it does in some of the states we like, and we like Texas. So let me tell you, we like Texas. We like Nevada, Southern Nevada. We really love Denver and Salt Lake City, and we like Seattle and Portland. So those are all smart cities that I think we'll focus more on, just because it's easier to get things done in those 4 or 5 markets.
Right. So what what California looks at Arizona and Texas and Southern Nevada, we look at Florida here on the East Coast. Hey, that's a great place to go. The weather's great. No taxes. I could go down there. I could live like a king. So from that standpoint, you talked a little bit about smart cities. In your mind, what makes a smart city in this day and age, besides just that they've got, cameras on the traffic lights and stuff like that? What makes for a smart city, if you would, if you feel that you want to opine on that?
Okay. Well, for us, it starts with the demographics. So strong millennial population. The millennials are a bigger generation than the baby boomers. So what cities have that demographic, following by the Gen Zs. So the second thing is, what's the economy look like? Is it diversified? And I think the cities we're in and the cities we want to invest in have a diversified economy. They're not solely driven by oil, or they're not solely driven by auto manufacturing or something like that. So it's got to have a diversity in its economy. It's got to have a strong educational system within the state and the city, so that people you really can't come out of school today and start a company in a way you couldn't do 25 years ago, 20 years ago. You have a laptop. I just had on my podcast Spencer Ratzkoff, who's founder of Zillow, and he talked about how different it was with his new venture called .la, that the ramp up in terms of, I can have some engineers in Silicon Valley, I can have some engineers in Utah, I can have some in offshore, but it's so much easier to start a business, and people are able to do that with an well-educated workforce. So those are 3 pieces. A fourth is really a public-private partnership that is going on, where there's investment from the public in either infrastructure around transportation or ports, and so we want to be in a city where there's this active participation between the private sector and the public sector. And I think the last is, and it's really not hard to see, is you just go look and see where the growth is, and where are people moving to, and those make up the smart cities. I think there's one other piece to it, is there's got to be some density of companies. So like you look at Austin, Texas, part of the reason an Apple wants to be in Austin is because Dell's there. Part of the reason Dell wants to be in Austin is because Google's there. And so it's drawing from this mutual workforce. And you're seeing that in places like Denver and Salt Lake and Austin, and you're seeing it in places like Portland and Seattle, where Nike's there, so that's good. So Under Armour's got to have an officer, and that's so it's that combination to draw from a workforce. And I think what's really going to change, I think, and in a positive way for all these markets, is people will be able to have people in different parts of these cities, and they can still have a main hub to come to work, but they can also work offsite, either from home or at a co-working facility. And I think that's what really drives these smart cities.
Yep. So it's funny because in our business, the definition of smart city is very different, but it springboards off of what you just said. So a smart city in our communications world is a city that's got fiber underground, that so there are things that can connect to it. It's got using smart technology like traffic light coordination, and it's got, you know, a background or a foundation for putting in 5G in the system. But, you know, it's really funny.
That was what I was, you know, Rich, that's what I was talking about the public-private infrastructure. Yeah. And I should have gone into it in more detail. No, those elements have to be there.
What you talked about was the front end that's got to happen before you get to that back end. And in our business, unfortunately, all we're looking at is, you know, is this a smart city? Do they have all these devices out there? But you're right that it has to have all those other things you mentioned before it can get to that point. So now let's take it inside from the standpoint of a landlord, a real estate owner. What's your take on prop tech? And you must have a million guys coming at you. Oh, we got this IoT device. Hey, we've got this backbone for your building. We've got a building management system. We got software as a service. We got this. We got flood a sensor that'll tell you if there's water in your basement. We've got all these things. They're coming at you like you know, bugs on the windshield. What are you doing about that? What are you thinking about that? How's prop tech part of your world?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I love that there's a term called prop tech, but I don't think it's going to last long because it's just tech, right? They're trying to solve problems. Uniquely into it, I had Zach Aarons on my podcast, who's a VC, who gave a good definition of what prop tech was. You know, is solving the last mile with scooter prop tech? I don't know. But at the end of the day, what we are focused on is how to make our buildings work most efficiently, how to improve the tenant experience to the best. And so we do get pitched a lot. And early on, we were making some VC investments here and there, and trying to pick some winners and losers. What I've since found is that it's very difficult for us to do that because our LPs really get nervous about conflict of interest. That was one of the reasons we had to spin out our 5x5 and really try to show it to be a separate company. But here's how we handle the specifics of your question, which is all this inbound. We have a team in-house that we call our Impact Strategic Task Force, who it's their job to vet all the technologies. When we like something, we then go to that group and say, we'd love to be your guinea pig. We come into one of our assets and let's do a test case. And that's how we roll things out. That's how we rolled out with Equium, which we think is it's an Australian company, and I had Gabrielle, their founder, on my podcast as well. But it all relates to the tenant experience and how we're going to get the kind of information about what the quality of the air and the light, the water is in the hands of people. OpenPath is another technology, which is the keyless entry, so you get rid of fobs, and it's all through your smartphone. And those all started because they got vetted by our Impact Strategies Task Force. And then we said it's a great idea and let's use it. And I'll tell you, there are so many things that I think can be addressed because buildings have progressed in the fact that in the old days, the Johnson Controls, the Honeywells would never allow APIs. You could never connect into those. You were signing these 10-year deals. That's starting to change. The Schindlers on the elevators and the Otises, they're finally starting to open up their little closed environment enough where some of these technologies can be used. But look, if you don't have the connectivity, a consistent connectivity in your building, none of this works. And so I think, as I said, over the next 5 to 10 years, the backbone of our growth will be connectivity as an economy. And I don't care what business you're in, and every business will be a tech business at its core. And I think software is going to continue to eat the world. And as I say to my 2 15-year-old girls and 10-year-old son, you need to understand basics of coding. You need to understand the basics of these things. You don't have to be a computer scientist, but I don't know how you compete in a world over the next 10 or 15 years if you don't understand the basics of this stuff. Because software is going to take anything repeatable, predictable, any job like that, software is going to take it away.
Yeah. So I as high an esteem as I hold you in, you've just risen up because John Gilbert from Rudin said those exact words to me at lunch about a year and a half ago. Rich, without connectivity, all this doesn't mean anything. So
Yeah.
it was literally almost the same words, Chris. And he's been so active, obviously, in and I'm going to use your term from now on. I love the term prop tech, but it's just tech. So the opportunity for John to do the things he's done with Nantum and the other software and devices that they're working on is all related to connectivity. Without the connectivity, he can't have that one screen. He can't have any of the things he's looking for.
Yeah. And I don't think people, I mean, we get a little sucked into this because we live it every day, but I don't think people understand that it was less than 5 years ago when most businesses ran on DSL, when most building management systems did not have any software backbone to the either the BMS or the EMS, emergency management system. I mean, this has been in the last 5 years where these steps and strides have been made, and it's been made because people moved from fax machines and radios and DSL towards connectivity and fiber in their building. So if you think about a short period of time that's been, the growth that I see is huge, even with all of this, this pandemic and the hardship and the unemployment. I think issues around connectivity and the technology that results from having great connectivity is what's going to get us out of this in the long run.
Yeah, and as horrible as this whole pandemic thing is, and as terrible for the economy it is, think about what would have happened to us if this happened 10 years ago and we didn't have that connectivity. And we're using dial-up modems to try to, communicate. There'd be no Zoom. There'd be virtually none of the communications and connectivity we have today. So I wrote a piece to sort of an open letter to the wireless industry about a week ago called "You Are Essential." Because without all these IT guys and all these tower climbers and all the people that are working hard and have created this whole network of communications that we've got, man, we'd be in 10 times more trouble than we are already with this, because at least we can communicate with each other at this point in time. Exactly the way you're saying, it's connectivity is going to be the main deciding factor here.
Well, I think what's sad is that here we are in 2020 and some people didn't convert to this. I have friends who are 55 and 60-year-old lawyers who just don't know how to work without being in an office with their paper, and they were still printing out emails, and that makes me really concerned. And as I said, I think the boardroom switch that's about to happen over the next year, if you don't have a skill set, just a basic skill set on technology, what this work from home experience has said is companies are going to say, we don't need you because you're too inefficient to work on our workforce. And so everybody I know who scoffs at it and says, I mean, for years we've been trying to get people to do conference calls with Zoom, and we could never get anybody to do it. Now everybody's doing it. And people say, why? Why is it just easier to do a conference call? It's because I'm looking at you right now, Rich, and I can see if what I'm saying has an effect or doesn't have an effect. And I think people aren't going to want to go back. So if you think you can go back to, hey, I'm on a conference call and I've got my written notes, and hey, I'm pulling out a law book, I just don't see a place for you. And that's sad, but this is really serious right now.
How many law firms have you visited, gone to that conference room, and then there's just the walls are just lined with books? And with LexisNexis, none of that means anything now. Those books are all obsolete. And so
the big firms transitioned. Yeah, the big firms transitions. But remember that most of the law work done in our country is done by sole practitioners or small law firms, and those are the ones who hadn't. And it's they can't go to court now, so they can't make court appearances, make money. They can't really get to do their analysis because they're doing off of books, and that's going to change real quick.
So, to wrap up, because I've got another panel to go to in a few minutes, but to wrap up, Chris, lessons learned, anything you'd like to share with people that we haven't already talked about, just in terms of, I think so much of what you said is right on, again, the transition in the boardrooms and how people will have to have certain skill sets and the connectivity piece. I think you've been right on with it. Any other musings or anything you'd like to share with people in terms of, lessons learned of late?
Well, a couple of things. I think I'll start with work from home doesn't really work. I've been sitting here this whole time, even though I've spent a lot of money on my Wi-Fi system and I have backup. The fact is I still have two 15-year-old girls doing their classes as we speak, my 11-year-old boy doing his, and my wife works at Gensler and she's doing a video conference right now. So work from home is a very tough thing. And so I don't think people will, I think we'll use it this way. We'll say, I used to get in the office at 8 and start doing work. Maybe I'll get in the office at 10, but I'll do those 2 hours of work from home, miss traffic. I think you're going to see, I think people are going to be really flexible. They're going to have times when they want everybody there, but coming into it, we'll probably see shifts and things like that. And so a lesson learned is people are adaptable. That's what I was trying to get to. We can adapt when we have to. And I think that's really important. Second thing is people are really good. I think we're seeing so much humanity out of all this. I'm so appreciative. Think about it. We have security people, building engineers, parking attendants, janitors who have to show up at our buildings because we have essential businesses in our buildings, and they do it with a smile. They're brave. And so I take a lot out of that. And we're so grateful to that for all the people doing that, not to mention the people in the hospitals and our first responders. The third thing I would say that I've learned out of this is that there's a challenging going on about how things are. People are, for the first time in a long time, saying, well, maybe I don't have to do it this way. And that whether that's work hours or how they work or what they'll accept, for their quality of life. I mean, I think this Gen Z and millennial generation, as they continue, they have a very different view about work-life balance and all that. And I think that's really gonna be a part of this. And the last thing I would say that I've learned about all of this situation is that if you think you can just like graduate from high school and get a service job somewhere and have a good life, I think it's now filtering out. You used to be able to do that in other states and all that. You got to have some basic education, and we as a country have to make sure that people are given the opportunity to learn about technology, because that's the only opportunity in our economy. And this has just been put on steroids because of this event. And so I hope we will do a massive infrastructure around connectivity and broadband, but I also hope we'll do really help people. I mean, this is not 4 years at Harvard I'm talking about. This is a year or two learning basic technological skills so that people can take on the new jobs that are going to come out of this. Because anything predictable, anything like that is an old job, and that's not going to be there.
Yeah. So I took a spot on the foundation board at a place in New Jersey called Raritan Valley Community College. And I think one of the underutilized, understood pieces of our educational society, if you will, is these community colleges that can teach you a skill and can get you the knowledge you need to get a good job. When people look down their nose on it and they're spending $300,000 or $400,000 on getting their kid into some school who's going to party for 4 years, and they're going to come out of college with a general education where those kids are toiling away at these, community colleges, really learning something, and they're going to work at Exxon, they're going to work at LabCorp, and I can tell you firsthand, they're printing masks and face shields with 3D printers at this place. And it's really good to watch. And I think that's kind of, I hope that dovetails into what you're saying about it. There's got to be a new paradigm on how we teach the next generation what they need to know to make a living and survive. Yeah.
I think the last thing I'd say is, look, I want to get back to work. I want everybody to go back out. But I really do. And I would love to see the state of California open earlier, but let's not do anything stupid. Let's all be good Americans and really listen to the science and stay put until it's safe. Because then I think we're going to come roaring back for a while, and we're going to have some starts and stops to the economy. And maybe long term, there's too much debt, and that might be a problem. But in the short term, I think people are raring to get back to work. But let's do it smartly.
Yeah, and I'd like to just say, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I think you're one of the brightest bulbs in the commercial real estate chandelier, if you will. And this was really interesting. And also, I'd like to give a shout out on top of what I said about our essential business of the connectivity piece of this and what we've done for the country. I want to give a shout out to those folks that have built the wireless networks, that are working on connectivity, that are the IT guys, the cybersecurity guys, and those guys like the tower climbers, the PMs and construction managers and all these companies. They deserve, sort of a round of applause from all of us for keeping us going and communicating during this. And just like you said, we're able to see each other and see what the reaction is. So I have a great debt of gratitude to those folks, and I thank them. And I thank you for being with us on day 2 of the Connected Virtual Tech Event.
It's an honor and a pleasure, and I just hope everyone is healthy and safe. And I really appreciate it. And you're right. We've got workers from Spectrum who was over at my house crawling underneath the house trying to make sure our connectivity was there. Those people are heroes too, who are doing that around the country.
Agreed. Great. Chris, thank you so much. And thanks to Mark for putting this together and introducing us in the first place. But thank you.
I appreciate it. All right. Thank you.
Bye now.